What a time to be a Star Wars fan, with so much Star Wars content being released. Since 2022, we've had the Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, Andor, Tales of the Jedi, Bad Batch Season 2, Star Wars Vision Season 2, and Mando Season 3. The Ahsoka show is on its way this year, and the announcement of 3 new films within the next 5 years. There's so much Star Wars all the time. Sometimes there's even 2 Star Wars shows overlapping each other. But why does the enthusiasm for Star Wars feel like it's running out? Why are lifetime fans like me becoming indifferent to the franchise we once loved above all else? An outsider might think that it's the best time to be a Star Wars fan with so much new Star Wars content coming out. But that's not quite the case. Whether it's YouTube videos, Star Wars toy sales, or critical reviews, there have been signs in recent years that Star Wars has lost its magic. Yes, there's been complete mismanagement of the franchise from Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy, with 12 films cancelled during her 11-year stewardship. Yes, Star Wars has been Disneyfied in many areas, and yes, there was no plan for the sequel trilogy, as confirmed by The Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker director J.J. Abrams.
And then it came to episode 9 and JJ pitched me the film and was like, oh yeah, Palpatine's granddaddy. And I was like, awesome. And then 2 weeks later he was like, oh, we're not sure. So it kept changing.
These are all huge issues that have plagued the franchise since the Disney takeover. But I think the biggest reason why Star Wars just feels meh is because of Star Wars fatigue. But what does Star Wars fatigue mean, and where does the term come from? I first heard the phrase being used in 2018 when Solo: A Star Wars Story was released, only 6 months after The Last Jedi came out. Now Solo bombed hard and made a loss at the box office, which was completely unprecedented in Star Wars' long cinematic history. Shortly after Solo's box office failure, excuses from the Star Wars and Disney side came out to explain what went wrong and why the film failed so badly. And this is where the term Star Wars fatigue was born. With articles from The Guardian, Forbes, The LA Times, and other mainstream publications using the term to explain why Solo failed. Disney CEO Bob Iger said this in regards to Star Wars fatigue. I just think that we might have put a little too much in the marketplace too fast. Or to put simply, oversaturation. When this term was used in 2018, I think it was an incorrect diagnosis of why Solo failed at the box office. As I would say, there are 3 more important reasons than Star Wars fatigue as to why Solo failed. First of these reasons was The Last Jedi, and the choices in that film, especially regarding Luke Skywalker. These choices annoyed a large majority of the Star Wars fanbase, some of which actively boycotted Solo, and some who just gave up entirely on Star Wars. Another reason why Solo failed at the box office was because no one ever asked for it, or even cared about the premise of the film. Which fan wanted to see an actor other than Harrison Ford, who was synonymous with Han Solo, play the character? And I'm yet to hear a fan who wanted to know how Han got his blaster, or how he got his lucky pair of dice that featured in the background of the Falcon's cockpit. The last reason why Solo failed, which isn't due to Star Wars fatigue, was very public production issues for the film, with the firing of the original directors, massive reshoots, and rumours surrounding the film, such as the story that lead actor Alden Ehrenreich received acting lessons during filming, because Disney were not happy with his performance as Han. If Solo was a good film, it would have succeeded, despite only being 6 months after The Last Jedi. If it was a film set in the Old Republic era, or a more original idea than Solo, I think it would have done well. So saying that Star Wars fatigue was present in 2018 because of Solo, I believe is jumping the gun a little. But now, after we've had 10 years of Disney Star Wars fatigue is absolutely a correct diagnosis for why Star Wars just isn't the same. And here's the evidence. George Lucas ran Star Wars from 1977 to 2012, and within his 35-year reign, 7 films and 4 shows were released. The originals, the prequels, and the animated Clone Wars film. And as for the shows, we had Droids and Ewoks in 1985, 3 short animated seasons of Tarkovsky's Clone Wars, and 6 seasons of Dave Filoni's Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Now compare that to the 11 years of Disney Star Wars. We've had 5 movies and 20 shows. That's 5 times as many shows in a third of the time. If Disney owned Star Wars for its 46-year lifetime, and kept to its current release schedule, we would have had 20 films, that's around one film every 2 years, 80 shows, and 1,608 episodes. That's one episode every 10 days for 46 years straight. And just for fun, as Disney Star Wars is notorious for cancelling Star Wars films, cancelling 12 films during the last 11 years, in this alternate reality where Disney have owned Star Wars since 1977, we would have had 48 cancelled Star Wars films. So why is Star Wars less special than it used to be? Well, the numbers speak for themselves. There has not been a 6-month period where we have not either had a Star Wars show or film during the Disney Star Wars era. It's not special anymore because it's ever present. A key economic theory to understand what gives something value is the concept of scarcity, where the demand for a good or service is greater than the availability of the good or service. Simply put, why are diamonds expensive but chocolate is cheap? It's because diamonds are more scarce. And say what you want about Star Wars since Disney took over, but Star Wars films and shows certainly aren't few and far between. If we look deeper into the numbers, it becomes even more clear that Star Wars is completely different now compared to the George Lucas years. Lucas kept his films 3 years apart, 1977, 1980 and 1983 for the original trilogy. Then a 16-year gap between the originals and the prequels, which also had a 3-year space between each prequel film. Phantom Menace, 1999, Attack of the Clones, 2002, and Revenge of the Sith in 2005. This allowed hype to build up between each movie, and gave time for filming and editing not to be rushed. Disney bought Star Wars in 2012 and released The Force Awakens in 2015, so you could say that they had a 3-year period between 2012 and 2015 to plan and build up hype for their Star Wars film. Unfortunately, this did not continue, with The Last Jedi releasing 2 years later in 2017 and then The Rise of Skywalker 2 years after that in 2019. Though shortening the gap between the sequel films from 3 years, as it was under George, to 2 years. On top of this, Rogue One was released between episode 7 and 8, and Solo was released between episode 8 and 9. So if we were going by George Lucas's release schedule, within a 6-year period we would have 2 films. With Disney's release schedule, within a 6-year period we got 5 films. This rush to release movies created an MCU-style splurge, which, as we are seeing in Phase 4 and 5 of the MCU, is not the best strategy to build excitement and anticipation for the next film or show. During Lucas's 35-year reign, the TV shows Droids and Ewoks were released 2 years after the original trilogy concluded, then a Tarkovsky series in 2003, and a Clone Wars animated show 3 years after the prequel films wrapped up, with Revenge of the Sith. Meaning that there was only the Tarkovsky Clone Wars show that aired between movie releases. Again, to hammer the point home, this meant that speculation and excitement was built up between movies. You didn't have to watch a TV show to gain a better understanding of these films, and you didn't have to check a Star Wars timeline to find out whether a show took place before or after a movie, and whether the characters would cross over. It was simple, the films were given time to breathe and stand on their own. This is utterly different to how Disney Star Wars have run the franchise over the last 11 years. In 2014, Star Wars Rebels was released, and it was a good start in terms of keeping Star Wars special and scarce. Rebels went uninterrupted until July 2017, when Forces of Destiny was released. Then Rebels concluded in March 2018, and Star Wars Resistance came out, as well as Galaxy of Adventures. Then in 2019, we have the miniseries Rollout and Mando Season 1. In 2020 we got 10 episodes of the Clone Wars Season 7 and 8 episodes of Mando Season 2. In 2021 we have 16 episodes of The Bad Batch, 9 episodes of Star Wars Visions, and 7 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. Then in the last 2 years we've had The Bad Batch Season 2, Tales of the Jedi, The Kenobi Show, Andor, Mando Season 3, and soon Ahsoka Season 1 and Skeleton Crew. The quality varies wildly with these shows. There are some amazing ones in here. Andor was phenomenal. The Mandalorian, despite a drop-off in Season 3, recaptured the magic of the original trilogy. And Tales of the Jedi I thought was really good. But for every Mandalorian, you get a book of Boba Fett. And for every Tales of the Jedi, you get a Star Wars Resistance. Every Andor, you get the Kenobi show. The great shows we do get are diluted by the quantity and lack of quality of the shows overall. The entertainment landscape is certainly different from George Lucas's time running Star Wars, with all the big production companies now having streaming services, paired with the MCU's influence to have a shared universe across TV and film, which is something that Star Wars and many other franchises have copied. But after a few years of trialling this method of quantity over quality, it's safe to say it hasn't quite worked. With Tales of the Jedi and Andor taking place in 2022, I should have been excited going into this year. But Kenobi also took place in 2022, and it just left me bitterly disappointed and deflated going into this year. And 2023 has continued that trend. The Bad Batch Season 2 was really good, and then The Mandalorian Season 3, which yes had a good ending, but it was a step down. I should be really excited for Ahsoka, which had a brilliant trailer, but I'm just too tired and hesitant to bring my hopes up again, just in case they get let down. And I think this feeling is shared by a substantial proportion of the loyal Star Wars fanbase. The higher-ups at Disney and Lucasfilm have finally seen the issue that they caused, of oversaturation. And as always is the case, with corporate bosses out of touch with the fans, they have taken a wrong message and admit to no blame. A few days ago in an interview with Empire, Kathleen Kennedy said the following: "I've often brought up Bond. That's every 3 or 4 years, and there wasn't this pressure to feel like you had to have a movie every year. I feel that was very important to Star Wars. We have to eventize this. It's much better to tell the truth. That we're going to make these movies when they're ready to be made, and release them when they're ready to be released." Now Kennedy gets 1 or 2 points for seeing the issue of Star Wars fatigue, but loses about 9,000 points for being the one who actually changed George Lucas's formula to begin with. And to adapt her words, Kennedy and Disney uneventized Star Wars in the first place. As said earlier in the video, Lucas released a film every 3 years and then a TV show after the trilogies were concluded. And to reference Bond as being a franchise to copy is kind of rubbing salt into the wound for Star Wars fans. No need to look towards Bond, just look to what the creator of Star Wars, George Lucas, did and continue that release schedule of a film every 3 years. Is there hope for Star Wars to go back to the solid foundation it was founded on? I think we all know it's highly unlikely. The destruction of once beloved franchises is a tale as old as time. Star Trek, Ghostbusters, Terminator, Jurassic Park, now Lord of the Rings, the list goes on, and Star Wars can be added to that list. I try to end every video with a positive, and for this video, I wanted to end with a strange and overly long cinema food analogy. Star Wars for me has gone from being that large bag of Butterkist popcorn, which once I opened it, I just couldn't stop because I love it so much, to now being the pick and mix stand, where there are so many options, some of which I love to eat, such as the white chocolate mice or giant Haribo strawberries, aka Andor and Season 2 of The Mandalorian, and some of which I'd rather throw in a bin than eat, like Spogs or Blackjacks, aka Book of Boba Fett and Kenobi. Star Wars is certainly not as special as it once was, but there are still giant strawberry Haribos to be found. And like the Star Wars fans who love the originals but hated the prequels, we just have to pick and choose the Star Wars that we enjoy. For some, that may be the prequels and prequel shows, such as the Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi, and for others, that may be just rewatching the originals and tuning into new Mando seasons. Because there are so many shows and films to come out over the next decade, there is a high chance that whatever part of the Star Wars galaxy you like, at least 1 or 2 shows or films will deliver for you. Anyway, what do you think? Are you, like me, suffering from Star Wars fatigue? And are you positive or negative towards the franchise as we look to the future? Let me know in the comments below. It's early days for the channel, so please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and gently tapping the notification bell to receive more videos like this in your feed. My Star Wars video essays, the 12 cancelled Star Wars films, and the slow death of Star Wars should be on your screen now, so if you like this video, consider watching those too. Thank you, and see you again.